From the heartland of America, focused on God, family, and country, the mouthpiece of the Midwest. This is Dale Carter's America.
Welcome back to our podcast. It is the center of the universe for common sense, and unfortunately, that's not very common these days. We're going to have a big meeting next week. The podcast is going on the road to Fun House Pizza. The one in Lee Summit on 50 Highway. And Kurt's putting up the graphic now on YouTube and Rumble. And we really want you to subscribe to these things so they populate immediately and you get all the video fun that we do on Dale Carter's America. The slide calls it a Truman County meetup. And Kurt, a lot of people are getting hung up on that Truman County thing. And, you know, that's just kind of a placeholder that we put there as a discussion point to talk about taking the eastern suburbs of what is now Jackson County and setting up our own county. I don't care what we call it. You know, maybe Kansas City forms their own county like St. Louis did in 1876, and we keep Jackson County. We keep the statues. I really don't care. It comes down to the points and the grievances, which we're going to get into next Tuesday night at Funhouse Pizza. So come. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to have some prizes. We've got a social hour that's going to start about 5. We'll start the broadcast at 6. And we want to hear from you. We want to hear your grievances. Maybe your grievance is the tax assessment thing, which was just a complete train wreck. Maybe it's the fact that, they want to build a stadium downtown and want you to pay $1 billion of the $2 billion cost. There are a lot of different grievances that I know that you bring to the table and reasons why we want to break off from what is now Jackson County. Again, Kurt, do you care what we call it?
Nope.
All right. So bring your grievances to Funhouse Pizza. Jim Dingman is preparing for a big crowd. So we want a big crowd at Funhouse Pizza. The pizza is going to be great. The beer is going to be cold. Prizes throughout the night. The artist who was with us last week, CJ, we got some of his CDs we're going to give out.
I got them right here.
Yep. And he was terrific. And that was an episode that a lot of folks watched and shared. We really like that. I've got some footballs for the Chiefs-Eagles Super Bowl. Remember that? We're going to give out some of that stuff. Bob Watson said he's going to come to the table with some prizes. And speaking of Bob is a fine sponsor of this here podcast. He is my State Farm agent, and he would love to be your State Farm agent. State Farm, with surprisingly great rates these days. Call and get a quote. This is a great time of year to be checking your auto, home, life insurance. He offers commercial insurance for your business, even pet insurance these days for your dogs. And if you've got a dog like I do, you know what those vet bills stack up to be. So call him and his staff today at 816-229-7878. They're at 7th and Main in Blue Springs, but they serve both Kansas and Missouri with great rates through State Farm. Always had State Farm, and since I've lived in the Kansas City metro, Bob Watson has been my State Farm agent. He is ready to serve you. Now, one of your complaints may well be crime, because we live in a county where crime isn't really punished, unless it's politically correct crime. You know what I'm talking about here. I don't have to get into too many details on this. And Henry Cuellar, who is a congressman from Texas who lives in Washington, D.C. now, he was carjacked in Washington, D.C., close to the U.S. Capitol, right? So this is what's happening in our big cities. And in Kansas City, in Jackson County, things like this are not being prosecuted. The turnstile effect is in place, and these criminals are right back out on the street again. You have something on Henry Cuellar?
Yeah.
A Democrat congressman was carjacked at gunpoint outside his residence.
Congressman Henry Cuellar, a Democrat from Texas, arrived home and was immediately flanked by 3 armed gunmen. They didn't harm the congressman, but stole his car and cell phone.
Democrat Congressman Henry Cuellar held at gunpoint just blocks from the U.S. Capitol. The White House blamed Republicans.
How are you going to blame Republicans for this? Isn't D.C. run by a bunch of Democrats?
I'm going to speak to what the president has done, right? The president has been very, very straightforward about what he has done to make sure that communities are safe.
So if President Biden's policies are helping bring crime down, would he be comfortable with somebody borrowing his Corvette and parking it on the street overnight in Southeast D.C.?
I'm not going to get into hypotheticals.
Yeah. I love Pete Ducey. He's great. And then on the left coast, San Francisco, which once used to be a world-class city, is now an open sewer. Dianne Feinstein, of course, the senator who died, they were going to have a big public funeral for her in San Francisco, and it's like, I don't think we can do that because crime is so rampant. They moved her funeral to a secure private area. Yeah. That's what's going on in our country.
The San Francisco Standard says, let me turn my volume up a little bit. Check. Though the public was initially invited, Feinstein's office on Wednesday announced a change of plans. Due to increased security, tomorrow's memorial service for Senator Dianne Feinstein will no longer be open to the public. Only invited guests will have access to the service.
Blame it on Republicans, because that's just what Karine did there in Washington, D.C. Blame it on Republicans. I don't get that. Pete Ducey asks a great question. These cities are all run by Democrats, and they've taken prosecution to a new low. They're trying to change criminal justice to favor the criminal, and they're doing a hell of a job. They're doing a bang-up job in cities. And that's one of the reasons I want to take my property in Blue Springs and set up a new county and take yours with me. Independence, Lee's Summit, all these places in eastern Jackson County, Grain Valley, we'd love to have you there. Oak Grove, we'd love to have you there. Sugar Creek, please come. And let's talk about it, and let's figure out what it is that we can do. Again, it's only going to take 100 signatures on a petition. We'll take that to the Jackson County Legislature, and if we have thousands of signatures, imagine what kind of impact that would be. They'd have to put it on the ballot and let us at least vote on it. And that would be our Declaration of Independence. So that's what we're trying to get done. And again, that is next Tuesday night as we record this. It'll be October 17th at Funhouse Pizza on 50 Highway in Lee's Summit. And we ask that you please come. I'll tell you who is going to be there. Kirk Doris is going to be there from Medicare Simplified KC. He's going to be there to answer questions because we're coming up on a big deal here. If you're 65 or older, Medicare open enrollment dates are October 15th through December 7th. Kirk, and I think Lori Hocker is going to be there as well to answer questions that you might have. Medicare Simplified KC is exactly that. It takes all of this confusion that comes from the federal government, that is Medicare, and makes it simple for your situation. They're located at 3600 South Nolan Road, Suite F in Independence, Missouri. They are on the web at MedicareSimplifiedKC.com, and you can reach them on the phone at 816-701-6661. In-home appointments are available. Kirk and Lori are going to explain all of this to you in a way that you're going to get. Now, I just turned 60, so I've got like 5 years to wait. But if you're coming up on 65 or you know someone who is, this is an important conversation, and these are important dates. So if you're going to come to the deal at Funhouse Pizza, grab Kirk and Lori, and they'll explain it to you there, or set up an appointment for your house, and let's get this going, okay? One of our other sponsors, and, we need to invite these guys. I think about the folks that I have text numbers for, and I sent them all texts and let them know what we were doing, but I don't have a text for Clay Como shooters.
We'll get in touch with them.
Okay, get in touch with them. Tell them to be there, because I know Jim Dingman would love to say hi to those folks, and a bunch of you folks would love to say hi to them as well. Clay Como Shooters, where you can shop for firearms. They've got a range right there. You can do a membership. They'll train you, and they are really good. From the field trip that we took to Clay Como Shooters, that was a lot of fun. They train law enforcement, so they know what they're doing. Pistols, rifles, ammo, accessories. Come train with us. That's what they say. They're on 69 Highway in Clay Como. It is right there between I-35 and I-435, right there on the main drag in Clay Como. And you can read about them on the web at claycomoshooters.com, or just give them a call, 816-452-4867. They're going to love Jim Dingman because they've got that sign on the door that says, if you smell like marijuana, don't come in here. Right? Is that what it says? Or don't smoke pot in here, or don't bring your pot in?
Yeah, it says if you smell like weed, don't come in.
That's going on a lot. I mean, I was at the Mizzou game over the weekend in Columbia, and it's like, what is that smell? It's everywhere.
Ooh, that smell.
It's everywhere.
Can't you smell that smell?
All right, before we get into Israel and the rest of the world, the news is moving fast these days. That's why I wish we almost did a podcast today, because we need to. But RFK Jr. has decided to run for the presidency as an independent. which is very interesting, don't you think? He made that announcement yesterday in Philadelphia because he says he doesn't like Trump or Biden, and this basically lets him take that middle ground. But he's a Democrat.
Yeah. I mean, he's definitely a Democrat, and I think this Politico brings up the biggest question here, which is, does it, if you're looking at the screen, just pulling up this Politico article, people were anticipating that was what his announcement was going to be. So now the obvious follow-up question is, does him running as an independent hurt Biden or Trump more? There's been a lot of discussion about that, but I'm curious what you think.
I think it hurts Biden more than it hurts Trump in that sort of a matchup. Interesting because you've got those people who didn't like Trump. They held their nose and they voted for Biden. They might well go for RFK Jr. I think Trump's people are pretty rock solid.
Yeah, but there's people within the Republican Party that don't like Trump,
I'm one of them. I don't like the guy. Right. I mean, I like a lot of what he did, but I don't like the shenanigans. I don't like the circus atmosphere that went on. And I'm one of those people. Unlike a lot of people, I held my nose and I voted for Donald Trump because I voted for the policies that he put in place because they're a hell of a lot better than where we are today. And I was talking to somebody out in the bullpen area. I'm not going to name names here, but she was complaining about sales right now, that they're down, and it's because of this whole economy. And I said, well, Joey B's doing a great job, isn't he? Well, I don't think anybody could have done anything with all of this. And I said, you got to be kidding me, right? Because Donald Trump basically gave Joe Biden the blueprint and said, if you don't touch it, it'll be fine. And what did Joe Biden do on day one? He reversed every policy that he could, which is why it's hysterical to me that this whole thing with the wall on Mexico, what is Biden saying? He's like, oh, I didn't have any choice. I tried, but they wouldn't work with me on that. What the hell? Does anybody buy that?
Yeah, well, we're kind of jumping around, but
I know I'm jumping around.
No,
but
it's okay.
Yeah,
but on the RFK thing, I mean, I think historically, certainly within the last 20 or so years, independent candidates have typically taken votes away from Republicans more than Democrats. Certainly, if you look at like the libertarian candidates and things like that. And I do kind of think that this is probably a similar situation. If you look at the people who have been supporting RFK on social media and publicly, it's a lot of people on the right. Specifically because of his criticism of the COVID stuff and Big Pharma, his criticism of the Ukraine war. So I don't see somebody who is going to vote for Joe Biden against Donald Trump, someone who wants to vote against Donald Trump voting for RFK instead of Joe Biden. I mean, there's going to be some of that, but I do think that he'll take more from Trump than he does
when you
Biden.
talk about third-party candidates, I mean, the most famous in recent memory is Ross Perot, and he was essentially a Republican. And he did take votes away from George H.W. Bush. There was no doubt about that. And he basically gave Bill Clinton the presidency with 42% of the vote. I think if you look at it, and one of the tools that I use is Select Smart. Have you ever used that? Have we talked about that before?
No.
Select Smart is a website where it asks you like 25 questions, and not only where you fall on the 25 questions, but how important the question is to you, which I think is important as well.
Yeah.
And then it will shoot out, who you ought to vote for based on who agrees with you. And I will bet if I took that test right now, RFK Jr. would be pretty far down the list.
Yeah.
He's a liberal guy.
Same. Yeah. I mean, he's gotten a lot of popularity again because of his criticism of some of these kind of hot button issues. But on other hot button issues, he's very liberal, on abortion and things like that. So I certainly am not going to vote for him. I have been very interested by his candidacy, but I do think, that he's been getting a lot of support from more right-leaning people that either don't like Trump or see, maybe some of the flaws that they perceive, in Trump. So I think he'll get a lot of votes from that.
Interesting. I mean, we've never had a third-party candidate win.
Yeah.
Right. Teddy Roosevelt was a third-party candidate. He got some states. Ross Perot, he didn't get any states, but he took a chunk of votes. I just don't see it because our party is so entrenched in camps of Republican and Democrat. I don't see it happening, but it is interesting. And, we thought 2024 was going to be a very interesting campaign anyway, and this, to me, just makes it more interesting.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, he's not going to win, but I do think he'll probably get a higher percentage of the vote than anyone has probably since Perot. Certainly more than like all these libertarian guys that have been running, and getting 2%,
They're not moving
1%.
the needle.
Yeah,
right. They're not.
He's going to get more than that for sure.
Okay, now back to Israel and the rest of the world. The White House with a straight face, Antony Blinken with a straight face, says there is no connection between the $6 billion released to Iran and what's happening in Israel. I don't buy it. Don't buy it for a second. Iran is a state sponsor of terrorism, and what you have going on in Israel right now, and we're going to get to a discussion, and I know you and I might have a little bit of a disagreement on what's going on over there, but Hamas launches a terroristic attack a la 9/11 for the United States out of nowhere. Apparently their version of the CIA didn't see this coming, and boom, they got hit. And what's the next thing that Hamas does? They take a bunch of hostages, and they say, if you come in with troops, we start killing hostages, because that's what they do. They're cowards, and this is the cowardly way of doing things. You hit somebody, and then you hold hostages, including Americans, by the way. There are Americans being held hostage over there, and it's sponsored by Iran. And what did we just do? We gave them $6 billion of their own money. Now, why would we do that?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think the Iran money is a pretty dumb thing. I don't know if there's been evidence of direct correlation to this attack. I haven't really looked into it.
Does there have to be? I mean, we gave them $6 billion.
Yeah.
Maybe they took it out of their rainy day fund and said, okay, we're going to buy some missiles. I mean, the liberal arguments on some of this shit just really make me laugh. And one of them on Facebook was, well, they just got the money. They couldn't have bought a bunch of missiles. I mean, come on. Can we be grown-ups here and talk about what's going on here? Iran is a state sponsor of terrorism. Hamas is a terrorist group. Draw the line.
They certainly have funded them in the past. I mean, that's
well, we just made it easier for them.
Yeah.
We made it easier.
And there was a clip that was going around of the president or Ayatollah or whatever the heck he's called over there with Lester Holt. This was pretty recently, I think, right after they gave him the money. Because their claim was, that they're going to use it for humanitarian reasons or whatever. So Lester Holt asked him about that. I thought his answer was kind of interesting. Just play that real quick.
But what is your expectation of its use? We're told that it's for humanitarian purposes, food and medicine. Do you believe you have the right to use that money in any way that you see fit?
This money belongs to the Islamic Republic of Iran, and naturally, we will decide, the Islamic Republic of Iran will decide to spend it wherever we need it.
So if I hear you clearly, that it will be used for more than humanitarian purposes in your view?
Humanitarian means whatever the Iranian people needs. So this money will be budgeted for those needs.
Yeah. I saw this, and he's basically telling the truth there. Mm-hmm. It's our money, and we're going to use it however we want to. Mm-hmm. And what the Biden administration did was they put a number on what a hostage is worth. So they're taking hostages right now in Gaza, and there are American hostages there. So are we going to give them $1 billion per hostage?
I don't know.
Why not? I mean, we've set the standard. Why not?
Here's some more video from this is from Gaza, from the response from Israel bombing. So
it's terrible. It's terrible. People are dying, and Hamas is who initiated this. And the question becomes, is there a solution for any of this? And from a historical perspective, Kurt, I would tell you that the closest we came to peace in this area, first of all, you could go all the way back to 1948, right? We came out of World War II, and the powers that be in the world said, in response to what happened to Jews in Germany, right, with the Holocaust, we're going to give them this piece of land, about the size of the state of New Jersey, okay? We're giving the Jewish people a state, and it's going to be called Israel, right, in 1948. So we can't put that toothpaste back in the tube. That happened, right? You would agree with that, right?
Maybe. I mean, yeah, I don't know.
And since that time, probably what I would agree with most is probably what's going to have to happen if we're ever going to get to peace is a two-state solution. And the closest we got to that was in the year 2000. Bill Clinton convened a summit, in Camp David. Ehud Barak was the prime minister of Israel, and Arafat was the PLO guy. Mm-hmm. They got together. Ehud Barak basically gave Yasser Arafat everything he wanted, and Yasser Arafat walked away because they don't want a two-state solution. They want to kill every Jew. That's their stated purpose. They want to kill every Jew. So basically, a country the size of the state of New Jersey is sitting over there with guns pointed at them from every direction. They're the only democracy in the region, and that's their solution. They want to kill every Jew in Israel, or run them out, or put them somewhere else, and take back their state. We talk about this in this country with Native Americans, right? Mm. Europeans, like my forefathers who came to this country. I'm not giving my house back. Are you giving yours back?
No.
Okay, what if they showed up and started blowing shit up? You going to give your house back?
I mean, the same could be said about the Palestinians, though. Like, they believe that they have a right to the land as well. And I'm not really taking a side on it. I don't really like either of them, to be honest. I don't support Israel. I don't support Palestine. But I think it's a little bit more nuanced than that. Even with the 2000 Camp David thing, I'm not an expert on this by any means, so take this with a grain of salt. But I've heard conflicting accounts, that the two-state solution wasn't really guaranteed the way that it's been portrayed. And it's also true that Israel has, in some ways kind of led to the uprising of Hamas and funded them and XYZ. It's a very complicated situation.
You think Israel's funded Hamas?
Yeah.
How so?
There's been some evidence of that in terms of the elections that have been had, in terms of where the actual funding came from. And there's an argument to be made that they wanted this enemy. Now, this was a long time ago. This is not currently, but they wanted the scapegoat. They wanted the enemy of Hamas in order to, further their own interests, in order to retake the West Bank or retake Gaza and things like that. And I don't really have a side per se on this. I don't really support either side, to be honest. Israel, I don't really support. I used to, but not so much anymore. I mean, they have a very outsized influence in American politics, which is not good. We give them a lot of money, which is not good. And I think they certainly have a right to defend themselves. I think Palestinians, probably have a lot of legitimate grievances too. But my thing about this is just like, it's terrible. The attacks, the terrorist attacks are terrible. Obviously, nobody should be flying paragliders, and taking hostages and killing innocent people. Now we see Israel bombing Gaza and killing tons of innocent people there. And it's just sad because now all of these war hawks and everyone's coming to their side. It's either like, the pro-Israel people like, we have to glass Gaza, kill everybody, wipe it off the face of the earth.
I don't agree.
And then you have the Palestinian supporters that are saying, well, they're in occupied territory. Israel doesn't have a right to exist. And everyone's just running to their prospective sides.
Right.
And what it's going to lead to is America suffering. We're going to get dragged into another foreign conflict, billions of dollars, American lives, American military supplies. I mean, there's videos from Israel where the Hamas people are coming in, on these paragliders, and there's videos of them like that we won't show on the podcast, very graphic videos. They're using M4s, American M4s. Where did they get those from?
Afghanistan, maybe.
Yeah,
we left a lot of shit there.
So, and it's like, people are just so quick, I think, because it's a terrible situation. But what you see on Twitter, what you see online, is not representative of what's actually happening. I think.
Okay, well, let's go back. Let's rewind the tape here a little bit, because all the way back to Golda Meir, and I put up the slide that basically she said back in the day when she was prime minister, you can't negotiate with people who want to kill you. Every president of the United States since 1948 has tried to fix what's going on in the Middle East, Republicans and Democrats. And we've come close a couple of times, and it hasn't worked out. So what is the solution? Israel is there, and it does exist. And as far as I know, they're not the aggressor here. The aggressor's coming from the other side, and they're done with it. And when you pick a fight with Israel, you better buckle in, because it's not going to be pretty.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not entirely sure that they're not the aggressor. I mean, in this direct situation, they're certainly not.
They're not the aggressor.
Hamas attacked them. They came over and performed terrorist attacks on them. But if you look historically, they have gone into the West Bank. They have gone into Gaza and occupied those territories. I mean, so there are two sides to the argument, and I'm not saying which one I support or not. Like I said, I don't really support either. But the difficulty is that there hasn't been a legitimate, solution presented, and the only exception to that I can think of is when Donald Trump was president. We had historic peace in the Middle East. We had a lot of these historic deals that were made between these countries that were essentially, started by Donald Trump. He was sort of the catalyst for that. And so, I mean, that just is another piece of evidence that, we need him back as president, in my opinion. But, it's really sad. And it's sad to see American public figures and American politicians, just openly calling for, death and innocent lives to be taken. And, it's just... It's really sad, man.
I've got friends who are over in Israel right now, and I'm scared to death about it. When the shit was hitting the fan, we were starting to get warned of don't go into that area. And I have a passport, and I would love to see the Holy Lands at some point before I assume room temperature. But this is not the time to go do that. I think one thing you and I could agree on is that Joe Biden is not the president who's going to be able to deal with this.
Yeah.
Yeah,
of course.
Robert Gates, who was the defense secretary for Barack Obama, famously said he can't name one thing that Joe Biden got right in foreign policy in 4 decades. 4 decades of being in Washington, D.C. He can't think of one thing he got right. And you know where Joey B was when the shit was hitting the fan in Israel? They were doing a barbecue for staff members at the White House. He could not interrupt his barbecue to come out and say a few words because he can't. And that's the problem. He's supposed to be on TV today at noon Kansas City time. I can't wait to see that. Pop some popcorn for that because he just can't do it. He's not up to the job. And if something like this doesn't show you that he's not up to the job, I'm not sure what I can say.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I mean, I don't think anyone takes him seriously at this point.
Well, Karine Jean-Pierre does because she said he's the best communicator in the White House.
Yeah, well, there you go. If she says it, it must be true.
And to your point, I mean, we're involved in Ukraine.
Yeah.
We've got China that we're going to have to deal with, right?
Yeah.
And Russia that we're going to have to deal with. And what Joey B is clinging to is the fact that, well, solar and wind, that's going to power our economy. So that screws up oil. So anything like this is going to spike oil prices, and that's going to hurt our economy. You've got, the auto workers on strike. And it takes fewer of you auto workers to make one of those little electric cars that we don't have the infrastructure for. So there are so many lose-lose things going on in the world right now, and it all comes back to that election to me. Mm-hmm. It's like you voted for this guy. He got more votes than anybody in the history of the Republic, allegedly, and this is what we're left with.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the bottom line to me is like I'm not a Israel hater. I'm not a Jew hater or a Arab hater or Palestinian hater, but it's just like our priorities are so far out of whack as a country. We can't secure our own border. I mean, our economy is falling apart. We have crime running rampant in our major cities, and yet we don't see nearly the outrage from our public officials for that as we do. Once Ukraine is attacked. Once Israel is attacked, it's like, rah! Oh, we need to go to World War III.
Yeah.
We need to send tanks. It's like, how about we send tanks to the southern border? How about we protect America first? Yeah. And until we protect America first, I'm not really interested in helping these other countries. I'm sorry, but we have our own problems that we're not taking seriously. And we are prioritizing Israel. We're prioritizing Ukraine over American safety, sovereignty, culture, and everything, which is just unacceptable to me.
Well, if you're thinking that, my point is, I think we ought to get involved militarily in Israel. I don't. I mean, I don't. But I don't think we ought to handcuff them. I think we ought to let them defend themselves and do what they think they need to do. And to your point, my biggest fear, what keeps me up at night, is our porous southern border. Think about this. What if one of these Hamas guys or Hezbollah guys says, we're going to fly to Mexico City, disguise ourselves as Mexicans or Venezuelans or whatever the hell we're going to disguise ourselves as, and go across the border and cause carnage in this country? I mean, why haven't they done it yet?
I can all but guarantee that they are already in this country. I can all but guarantee it. I mean, I don't have direct evidence, but given the fact that we have no idea who's coming over and they're coming over to the tune of 10,000 per day, I can all but guarantee it's already happened.
Okay, well, let's go back to the wall then, because this all started last week when Mayorkas, through Homeland Security, made a statement that it's so bad right now that we've got to do the wall. We've got to do the wall, and we've got to break 26 environmental laws to get it done. It's got to be done this fast because things are that bad at the border. And it shocked me because Kamala Harris told us the border was secure. Democrats have told us the border is secure. But now it's so bad that it's got to be done. And then spin. I don't know where you want to go with this, but Biden jumped into it, and then Mayorkas came back, and he said what he said he didn't really say, and he twisted it and spun it. Where do you want to go with all this?
I've got a KJP clip.
The president just told me that a border wall does not work. If that's the case, why does his own Department of Homeland Security secretary say in a public notice, quote, there is presently an acute and immediate need to construct physical barriers?
Here's what I can say. I can speak to what the president was very clear in saying, and also what you all have been reporting about this construction. So the facts are this is not new. These funds were appropriated in fiscal year 2019 under Republican leadership, and DHS is required by law to use the funds for appropriated purpose. That's what we're seeing. This was announced back in June by the DHS. And so, look, we believe that there are better effective ways of moving forward to secure our border and security, our border security, and we have continuously asked for Congress to act, to provide our CBP, the law enforcement at the border, to give them the resources they need to do their jobs. And so we're going to continue to call on Congress. We believe...
Blah, 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 blah. You know what? I wish, and he'd probably get thrown out for it, but do you remember the movie Animal House, right? When they had the big courtroom scene? Yeah. I mean, if Pete Ducey would sit there in the front row and whenever she says something like that and go, bullshit, bullshit, bullshit. Probably get thrown out, don't you think?
Yeah. Here's Mayorkas walking it back.
I want to address today's reporting relating to a border wall and be absolutely clear.
Spin.
There is no new administration policy with respect to the border wall. Allow me to repeat that. There is no new administration policy with respect to the border wall. From day one, this administration has made clear that a border wall is not the answer. That remains our position, and our position has never wavered. The language in the Federal Register notice is being taken out of context, and it does not signify any change in policy whatsoever.
Okay, so again, Biden says that Republicans forced his hand, that he has to do this. Remember now, facts get in the way of this. He had 2 years of Democrat control, both houses of Congress, right?
Yeah.
Why couldn't he walk it back then?
It's a good question.
Why, he's not being forced to do this. This guy on day one when he became president put out 5,000 executive orders and undid everything that Donald Trump did.
Yeah, and it's also it's convenient for them, like KJP was saying, oh, well, the funds have been appropriated by Congress, so we have no choice. Our hands are tied. It's since when do you care about the rule, the legal process of funds from Congress? They only use that when it's convenient to them, when it's something that they get caught, they get caught with their hand in the cookie jar. Then they're like, oh, well, we're just following the process. But then, when they actually want to implement their policy, their agenda, then screw it. They don't care about, the funds from Congress. They'll make it up themselves.
And again, can you imagine if a Republican administration basically said, this is such an emergency, we've got to waive 26 environmental laws to get this thing done immediately.
Yeah.
They would be screaming on Capitol Hill about how Republicans are just horrible, horrible people, and I can't believe we're doing this, the environment, blah, 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 blah. I mean, we just got the report that this was the hottest year on record. And I couldn't believe this. This came from our wire service. The hottest September ever on Earth. That's actually
False.
the first. Last month was the hottest September on Earth ever.
False.
Now, this used to be a molten rock, right? So that's wrong. And it's 5 billion years old. We are a speck of history on this rock. And because we've got such a big climate emergency, there's going to be a conference held in Dubai starting in November where they're all going to get on their big planes and fly to Dubai, right? You had a picture a while back of what it looked like when all the planes fly in for the conference. And it's not just the world leaders; it's their entourages. When Biden goes anywhere, how many planes are involved, and they don't care about any of that. But it's so important. They've got to get together to meet because they can't do a Zoom call. They've got to do it in person. It's just such bullshit. Such bullshit.
Yeah.
If your bullshit detector doesn't go off with these people, it's never going to go off.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, the whole hottest year on record thing is just false. But I wanted to quickly just kind of to finish my point that I was making about the wall and stuff like that and America being last. I pulled up an article from the Texas Tribune in 2020, and they're talking about, if you're watching on YouTube or Rumble, you can go pull up the article yourself. But they're basically talking about how the wall is costing way more to taxpayers than Trump initially said, and it's going to cost nearly $3 billion to build the wall. So that's their criticism. At the time, it was a criticism that it's going to cost all this money. We can't afford it. $3 billion, way too much. Now, how much do we give to Israel every year? We give about $3.8 billion. In 2019, we gave $3.8 billion in foreign aid to Israel, most of which was military aid. How much have we given to Ukraine? And this is just as of June, I believe. They've passed more since then. $76.8 billion in about a year and a half that we've given to Ukraine. So it just shows you where the priorities lie of our leadership. They want to support the sovereignty and the security of these other countries before our own. And until we reverse those priorities and until we get our priorities in order as a country, I don't really care,
Well, and, there's a day of reckoning coming for our country, too. It just has to, right? There's too many bad actors in the world who watch the news just like we do, and they see what's going on that southern border. It's a tempting target, I would think, for them.
Yeah, 100%.
And, they may well be here, to your point. So some things to think about here as we move forward. We want to thank a couple of our sponsors here, Royal Roofing and Solar. They built the roof on my house, and Austin Watterson and his team, they put up some stuff on Facebook, all the roofs they've done lately. And with what's going on with Evergy right now, even though I'm only going to have my house probably another 8 years, I'm looking into it because it's going to skyrocket. And Barack Obama promised us that. There's a promise kept. He said that electricity rates and gas rates, utility rates, would necessarily have to skyrocket to do what he wanted to do to the country. And now his boy Joey B is in there basically following suit. So you can do something about that. You can turn your house into its own power generator with solar. It would work for your house. I don't know that it's going to basically be able to run our entire economy. I guess we'll see. 816-540-7057. Austin, Mike Dale on his team is an expert at dealing with Evergy and with solar, and I think he's going to be at our deal Tuesday night in Lee's Summit, so if you have questions, I'm sure he'd love to answer them. There are tax credits and grants for small and rural business and ag producers as well, but if you need a roof, these are the guys, Royal Roofing and Solar, 816-540-7057. I think Dr. Taormina is going to be at the deal on Tuesday as well. We may have a sponsor all-star fest going on at Funhouse Pizza. And definitely talk to him. If you are 45 and you have not scheduled your colonoscopy yet, Mark Taormina and his team at Midwest GI Health and Wellness are ready to help you. They're in Lee's Summit. It's one-stop shopping. You do the prep, you go in, you get the colonoscopy, and if you got some polyps or whatever, they send those off and you deal with that. Maybe you get a clean bill of health. Most people do. And you come back in 5 to 10 years, depending on what the outcome is, and you get in front of it because colon cancer is a killer. And the folks at Midwest GI Health and Wellness are experts at it. They do the upper GI as well. They do you going in, coming out, whichever place you got a problem, they're going to be able to fix it. 816-836-2200. They're an awesome company, and in fact, they did the colonoscopy on my wife. So if I trust them with my wife, I trust them with you. 45 and older, you need to get that colonoscopy scheduled. Next segment on this deal, and I put this up because your favorite troll, and I let him get about one thing on me, and then I'm done with him. I'm not going to do what you've done with him. I'm not going to do what other people do on Facebook. I am not going to go back and forth with a keyboard warrior. I'm just not going to do it. Because you know what I talk about on this podcast, and I think what you do, right, is we have our beliefs, right, our principles, and we filter everything through our beliefs and principles. What the keyboard warrior says is, I don't like you, I don't agree with you, and when you say anything, I'm going to go find something that disagrees with Dale. Boom, look at that. I found that. And you can find anything on the internet, right?
Yeah.
Internet's wide open.
I mean, he's also just a nasty, miserable person.
He's a dick. So. He's an absolute dick.
It's one thing to disagree, but I mean.
Yeah, right. So I posted this thing. Maybe you saw it, the 5 best sentences out there. And number one, and they're all, I think, self-explanatory.
Is this on the Facebook page?
Yeah, unless you're a liberal. You may disagree. And what it comes down to, the economic divide between conservatives and liberals. And I know that there are other things that separate conservatives and liberals, but for me, I start with money because, you know, I like money. I'm a capitalist. And this guy, your friend goes, I don't even think you know what a capitalist is. I think I do know what a capitalist is. And I told him, I said, you're a capitalist because you won't come on the podcast unless we pay you. So that makes you a capitalist. Congratulations, there's hope. So the economic divide between conservatives and liberals. What is the role for our government versus the private sector? And conservatives, we want to keep as much of our money in the private sector as possible because it fuels everything. And if you're a liberal, you believe taxing everybody to death is the most prudent way forward. That you take all that money into Washington, D.C., you set up programs A through double Z, and you filter that money out a little bit at a time, and it makes the world a better place. I completely disagree with that. And when I see stuff like this, I'm going to post it on my Facebook page. I know this guy doesn't like it. He can start his own damn Facebook page, right? And I guarantee you, I'll never go to his Facebook page. And if I did, I probably wouldn't say, I hate you, so I'm going to go find out something that disagrees with you and post it because I'm a keyboard warrior and I can find anything online. I can't get into a regular discussion with you, but I can do this. It's on the podcast page, not my page.
Gotcha.
It's in there somewhere. Okay, it's 5 sentences. It's going to go quick here. Number 1, you cannot legislate the poor into prosperity by legislating the wealthy out of prosperity. There is a view out there, and I think this guy shares it, that we live in a zero-sum economy. If I've got 100, you can't have it, right? Because I've taken 100 out of the economy. It's not a zero-sum game. If you come up with a great idea, if you produce a great product and take it to the marketplace, you can make that money. You can make more money. We can grow the economy. It's not a zero-sum game. So you cannot legislate the poor into prosperity by legislating the wealthy out of prosperity. Number 2, what one person receives without working for, another person must work for without receiving. I mean, that gets back to the fact that the government doesn't make money. It takes money out of the private sector, okay? So if you're getting a benefit from the government, let's say Joey B. waves his magic wand and more student loans get forgiven. If that happens, somebody else paid for it. It came out of my tax dollars that go to D.C., Kurt's tax dollars that go to D.C. Somebody else paid for it. It wasn't, a genie in a bottle kind of a thing. Number 3, the government cannot give to anybody anything that the government does not first take from somebody else. Well, I think we just covered that. You can't multiply wealth by dividing it. Think about that. You can't grow the economy by dividing the economy. And then 5, when half of the people get the idea that they don't have to work because the other half's going to take care of them, and when the other half gets the idea that it does no good to work because somebody else is going to get what they work for, That's the beginning of the end of any nation. And to me, we talked about Ayn Rand and Atlas Shrugged. That's the point of Atlas Shrugged. The people who produce the wealth, who make the things, who make a difference in the economy, basically said, screw it, and they left the economy, and basically the whole world fell apart in Atlas Shrugged. Not to give away the 1,000-page book, but that's kind of what
Well, you
happened.
didn't read the book, so.
I watch the movies. If it's going to be really hard reading, I
Yeah.
went to college. I'm done with all
anything
that.
over 100 pages is.
That's not true. I read a novel. Greg Iles has written a trilogy of books, and Natchez Burning is the first one, and it was 870 pages, and it's the first of 3. It was really good. If it engages me, because I have adult ADD, so if it engages me and pulls me in, I'll read it. But man, Atlas Shrugged was a thick read.
Yeah, and it's dense too. So
thick, dense, whatever you want to say. So, I mean, that makes sense to you, right?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly agree with all 5 of those things, and I would call myself a capitalist. I don't think that capitalism is a political ideology. I mean, it's an economic system. I think it's the best economic system, but it's not perfect, of course, because humans are not perfect. And, I think a lot of the criticism that people have of the American economy or of capitalism is not necessarily coming from capitalism, but it's coming from the marrying of the market with the state, which we see now more than ever. COVID being a really good example, propping up the pharmaceutical industry by making people take all these shots, by allowing, people to be fed this information that feeds the pocketbooks of the pharmaceutical industry. There's all kinds of subsidies for every industry. There's subsidies in the energy sector. There's subsidies for education, which has become, public. That's not privatized. So we don't really live in a true capitalist system in a lot of ways. Now, there's probably some good reason for that, but to point out, that, look at all of this money that the pharmaceutical industry is making, for example, and say that that's a problem with capitalism, I don't think is very accurate, because it's the government that is propping up that industry and by doing all these things that they're doing. So I think that's the problem that we need to address, is not the system of capitalism itself, but rather the marrying of these big industries, with the government that props up these industries and gives them monopoly, and allows them to not fail. We bailed out the auto industry. That's another great example. Housing, is another great example. So if we actually had a free market in a lot of these places, we might see better results.
Well, and the government's always got their thumb on the scale, and all you have to look at there is electric cars. I mean, the fantasy that we're going to go to electric cars is based on the fact that the government has their thumb on the scale there, to your point. All right, so speaking of cars, you need to get insurance for that car, and for that insurance, we ask that you call Bob Watson and get a quote, 816-229-7878. 7th and Main in Blue Springs, auto, home, life, commercial insurance, boats. Of course, your boat's probably done for the year, I would think. Licensed in both Missouri and Kansas. I don't know if he's going to be at the deal on Tuesday night or not, but he's an awesome American. We just love talking politics with Bob Watson. But he covers Republicans, Democrats, conservatives, liberals, because all of us need to have insurance. And Bob Watson's the guy to turn to there. Get a quote. Surprisingly great rates with State Farm. They do all these fun commercials with our favorite people like Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, and now even Coach Andy Reid is in the commercials. But when it gets right down to it, you need an agent, and our guy is Bob Watson, 816-229-7878. With Democrats running the show in D.C., you never get to the real truth of the matter. You really don't. I think you and I know that men are men, women are women, especially in terms of competition in high school and college. We don't want, guys on the swim team. I mean, that's what it's come to. So we turn to the British Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak. He is saying what Joe Biden won't, that men are men and women are women.
Also shouldn't be controversial for parents to know what their children are being taught in school about relationships. Patients should know when hospitals are talking about men or women. And we shouldn't get bullied. And we shouldn't get bullied into believing that people can be any sex they want to be. They can't. A man is a man and a woman is a woman. That's just common sense.
Well, it's biology too. And the Brits are always so polite when they talk, right? Even when they're mad. I mean, it just comes across as polite. So that's Rishi Sunak. He is the British Prime Minister with some common sense for you. And if that doesn't get it for you, I saw a picture of a T-shirt online. Do you have that? Because I thought this would be a great way to sum up.
What's the T-shirt?
The T-shirt is basically, I sent it to you.
Oh, you did?
I did.
Oh, crap.
The essence of the T-shirt was, if you need to know the difference between a man and a woman, just kick them in the balls.
Oh, yeah.
And if they double over, it's a man, and if they don't, I guess it's a woman. Right?
There you go.
Did you find a T-shirt?
Well, I can hold my phone up to the...
Hold your phone up to the camera. I think I put that on Facebook as well.
It's backwards, too.
It's backwards.
Yeah.
Just know that if you kick somebody in the balls, you'll
just know
find out
that
the
Dale
difference.
sent it to me and I forgot.
Yeah, that's all right. So maybe we'll bring some of those T-shirts. Maybe Tammy Ash will make that T-shirt for you next Tuesday night. We can't wait to see you at Funhouse Pizza. It's going to be on 50 Highway in Lee Summit. Again, we're going to gather about 5 o'clock. We start about 6 with the broadcast. We're going to spend a lot of time talking about extricating ourselves from Kansas City. Whatever you want to call it. You want to call it Freedom County, you want to call it Truman County, you want to call it Jackson County, and let them have Kansas City and call it whatever they want to. Whatever the name is, it's the principle that matters, and we're going to talk about that next week at Funhouse Pizza in Lee's Summit. Until then, this is Dale Carter's America.
The views expressed on Dale Carter's America are Dale's and Kurt Wheeler's. They do not necessarily reflect the views of KFKF or Steel City Media. Comments can be sent to dalecartersamerica@gmail.com. Check back for weekly episodes. Subscribe, spread the word, and give us a 5-star review. Thanks for being a part of Dale Carter's America.